Hi there, I'm Carl Randolph, the Artistic Director for Transformation Theater, and I would like to welcome you to our first roundtable discussion on our first roundtable discussion talking about BIPOC people and the theater. A few things before we get started. For the sake of time and the number of panelists that we have that we're really excited to have joining us, we will not be asking questions during this seminar, although feel free to use the chat session to be able to so you can use the chat section to make whatever comment you want. This is our first experience, so you can see we're having a few little technical difficulties, so bear with us, and we'll be getting started shortly. I do want to say that I'd like you to make a donation if you possibly can, either on our website at www.transformationtheater.org or on our Facebook page. Find us and like us, and all proceeds from this session will be sent to Black Lives Matters. So now I'm really excited to introduce our panelists for this roundtable discussion. First up is the Artistic Director of New Repertory Theater in Boston, Michael J. Bobbitt.
Hi, everyone. I miss you all in DC.
Hey, Michael.
Founding company member and board president for Washington Stage Guild, Laura Gianarelli.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here.
Actor and playwright, Kelly Renee Armstrong.
Hi.
Actor, playwright, and administrator, professor, director, and all things theater, Jennifer Nelson.
Hola.
There she is.
Hey.
And artistic managing director for First Stage in Tysons, Virginia, Alex Levy.
Everyone.
Hello.
DC-based actor, director, and educator, Gerard Alex Taylor.
Hello.
Actor and director of Scorpio Entertainment in DC, Edward Daniels.
Hello, everybody.
And artistic director for Mosaic Theater in DC, Ari Roth.
Hello, everybody.
And now our moderator, writer, actress, filmmaker, and theater educator, Letitia Jones.
Well, I'm Ife.
Hi, and hi, fans.
Oh my goodness, and I left off our most illustrious guest. See, this is what happens when you repass things. Joining us from Chicago, our award-winning actor and director, Ife Butler.
Hi.
Oh,
Thanks, Carl. I am so happy to be amongst this amazing panel. And you guys are, of course, incredible legends in your own rights in theater community. I'm just honored to be able to talk to you guys. So thank you so much. And I want to reiterate something that Carl said, that if you are watching and if you, have a question or comments put in the chat box, you may. And this is my first question I kind of want to throw out to everybody, including our participants. And my first question is, in the spirit of Black joy and coming at anti-racist work out of love, what's something that has brought you joy or hope over the past few weeks? So this is just a general question to everybody.
The biggest thing for me is that people are beginning to listen, whether they hear or not, I'm not sure, but they are at least beginning to listen.
I think seeing some statues pulled down and buildings being renamed and flags being banned, all that feels like a change is like on the horizon. I'm a little nervous because I think that protesting and rioting isn't sustainable, but I'm happy right now we're getting this moment to like make some big changes.
I think something that has given me hope the last month or so has been what everyone else has said, but the volume of protests around the country, and even in small places. I was sort of shocked to see that outside Leisure World off Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring, there were like dozens and dozens of little old ethnicities waving signs on Georgia Avenue. And that's not something we've seen a lot of. There have been protests in the past downtown, but it seems like it's happening everywhere. I have cousins up in Vermont, and in Rutland, Vermont, they had, for Rutland, Vermont, a very big Black Lives Matter protest. And I think that kind of tidal wave gives me hope. I worry, like Michael said, that these things are not sustainable and that it can all, but I hope that it will move forward. And that gives me joy.
And same here, what Ife said, I think that I've been happy to see so many people joining in the movement, and being here in DC, some of the protests downtown, some of the demonstrations, seeing just all of the different faces and the different types of people that are joining in. And even here in my neighborhood, people that are wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts and asking questions or saying hello at the dog park, that, you know, people that never ever spoke are suddenly, you know, part of the conversation and actually starting conversation. And I think that's critical and crucial. And I hope that the conversations are sustainable so that we can actually get some progress out of this.
I,
Go ahead, Ms. Nelson.
thank you very much. One of the smaller things, it's smaller in a way, things that I've seen that's been happening since the kind of pandemic that we're going through right now, is hearing people talk about theater as though it's accessible, instead of something that you only see if you know somebody else who's in it, or if you're in it yourself, or, you know, if you have some other kind of hook that brings you in. But that a couple of people that I've met that I didn't know before then or I've heard them start talking about a play, you know, and I don't even know if they saw it, but at least they're aware that there is something, there are things happening in town around them that they can access relatively easily without having to spend a whole lot of money. And that they now think of it as something that they can do, and not something that maybe they would do sometimes somebody else took them, or that kind of thing. And so in a way, I find that as a hopeful light.
Black Lives Matter Plaza, that brought me joy. So.
And thank you so much for answering, and kind of in that, you know, we're talking about, of course, Black Lives Matter Plaza, which is very interesting, kind of cool, and just all these conversations. And I feel like it's a common phrase when you're talking about Black culture in the mainstream. Like, one of the phrases, they want our rhythm, but not our blues, you know, meaning that, you know, they have the focus on the upbeat and kind of stylish aspects of Black culture, and not necessarily anything else. But in contrast, I feel like some cultural institutions also have a tendency to focus on the blues and the trauma, and not focus on the rhythm and style in equal measure. So my question for some of the actors, writers, and directors is trying to find a balance between, like, Black pain and Black joy, something you consider in the projects that you create, or the ones that you choose to participate in, and how do you address it?
I think I believe that you can't have one exclusively without the other. I mean, you know, I walk out the door and my day begins that way. You know, I have armor on when I leave the house, because that's who I am as an African-American person in America. That's the way, that's what systemic racism is. It sets me up before I leave the house to know that something could possibly happen and I got to get ready for it. Going into a rehearsal room or to work in the theater is another layer of that, because now I have to navigate all these people and what they think I should be, who they think I might be, who they deem I am, which is a privileged part of the society of theater as well. And sometimes when I walk in that room, there's nobody that looks like me that I can talk to. So it becomes this constant thing that I don't think it's something that, it's just life. And I don't know how you prepare for that. It's just something that's ingrained in me as a person that I know I have to deal with every day. So it's just another layer when I get to the theater, because people all of a sudden think I can leap tall buildings at a single bound. I can't. All I can do is bring you my artistry and come in the room and try to be the best that I can be and try to hold that all together and not go crazy every day. Because, you know, it's a mental thing too. You got to get this head together before, you know, you deal with all these people.
Yeah, I think that theater is inherently political. Like social justice is inherently built into what we do. I do think that in this country, most of the shows that are about marginalized people reduce the show to being about the thing that makes them marginalized. And therefore we see a lot of trauma, Black trauma or trauma from marginalized people on stage as the main plot point. I know as an artist, producer, writer, director, whatever you want to call me, I have shied away from that for the most part. I think 90% of the work that I've done has been about the contributions of culture, the contributions that people of color have added to this nation, rather than the travesties of race. And I think that, especially as a producer and someone who commissioned plays, I'm all about finding new work that centers itself around Black joy or the joy of BIPOC people in this country, or other marginalized people, gay people, Jewish people. You know, how many Jewish plays have I seen that are about the Holocaust? How many gay plays have I seen about the travesties of coming out? There, as a Black gay man, I will tell you, I don't spend my whole day thinking about being gay and Black. Mm-hmm. I do laundry. Stuff going on. I want to see, and I think maybe that's a way for us to bridge the gap to we can show all the great things we've brought to this nation versus Black and white issues. So I hope that producers, I hope this shift will also have people putting up more work that center around joy.
Hear, hear.
So I just wanted to say that, you know, like, so Transformation Theater is really brand new. We've been around for barely a year. And this is one of the things that we created the company for in the first place, was to try to find a way to celebrate diversity in a way that is not stereotyped. And I wanted to, it was a little bit of, we're going to get into this probably a little later about colorblind casting and so forth, but I wanted to find stories that were written specifically for and about underrepresented people. And so it started before the protests began, but it almost felt kind of timely that all of this is happening. And it's nice, you know, to go back with, well, what am I happy about too, is the fact that we started this company trying to do this. And now I feel like there's momentum to be able to really now move forward and to represent underrepresented people in a positive light and show them doing their laundry, and not dwell on the crisis necessarily of being underrepresented, but the celebration of being diverse.
And Jennifer, you were going to say something?
Me?
Yes.
Yes, I forgot what it was already, but that awakened something else in me. Thank you very much, Paul. And I've been doing theater for a long time, and I'm old now and happy about it. And that when I started, everything I did, whether it was my choice or just the choice of the community around me or, you know, whoever else I was working with, was always to be doing something about Black people. I didn't always want to do shit about Black people, excuse my French, but it was an interesting kind of, I don't know, journey that I had to go through, because I was not raised in a Black community. And, you know, my parents are college educated, and that, you know, it's like, that was the world that I came from. But when I started doing theater here in Washington, it was kind of assumed that whatever I did was going to be about Black people. some way or another. And either we were really poor and didn't know how to get along without the, money or whatever. And it was quite a while before I could kind of get my head around that, because that's not who I am. I mean, I'm very happy with being African American. I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think anybody else should have a problem with it. But on the other hand, I don't always want to be that either. What if I want to be in a play and be, the queen, or I don't know, something else besides, the person who helps somebody get through school, or, that just is there to be if not the maid, then to be the helper that, is to help a primary character survive. And I think that's something that we can be proud of, in a way, that in our theater community, we've started moving past that not everything now that has African Americans or Latinos or Asians in it is going to be about African Americans, Asians, or Latinos. And for that, I think we need to not only be very gracious, but we need to back it up and say, yes, this is what we're doing. Look at what we're doing now. This is not accidental that this is happening. We're proud of this. And these are the things that we would like to continue doing, and that we would like to invite more people from other ethnicities and et cetera to be part of the evolution of the local theater community. The end.
Carl, just to add real quick, Carl, I do think that we producers profit so much from people's trauma, and I have a hard time seeing shows like that. I really have a hard time, because I feel the trauma, and I just would say that, and we need those historical stories, but I would not produce a play about sexual assault and then invite a whole audience of people who have experienced sexual assault and want them to pay and give me money. Do you know what I mean? That's how it feels to me. That's what I wanted to add.
Well, speaking of that, Michael, I know you've been doing like Zoom call after Zoom call after interview after like whatever for like the past, you've been on a bit of a tour lately from your own house. It's been fascinating. But one thing in an interview that you said was it won't change until we change the structure. So could you elaborate on that, and what do you think that means?
Well, I think racism won't end until white people are willing to give up power. They hold it. It's like women's right to vote. It wasn't women that got the right. It was white men that gave up the right.
Gave it up. Yeah.
So I think that's when it'll change. And I think there are two components to it. One is changing policy, which sometimes can be faster and easier. The other part is changing hearts and minds, or I like to call it the culture. If you think about the Civil Rights Act in '64, was it? They were able to change policy, but there were still lots of people that hated Black people, right? So sometimes you can attack policy faster than you can change the hearts and minds of people, the culture. And so I am at New Rep, and even at Adventure Theater, we really looked at systems and practices and policies versus what I think the theater does well, which is to create programs and initiatives to address racism. They'll do discount tickets, or they'll do community engagement, and they'll do all these things that move the needle a little bit, but you're still operating in the same systems. And I also think that it's about the financials. You're still operating in the same systems that perpetuate white supremacy and racism and inclusion. Not being inclusive. So I'm looking at things like getting rid of my subscription series, which I think is a really racist model. If you think about it, who's got the resources to buy their tickets a year and a half in advance? And what seats are they buying? Are you leaving brown and Black and poor people sitting in the back and the sides? When you come to the theater, we stand in front of the stage and we say, "Thank you, subscribers. We love you more than we love the other people," right?
Yep.
I mean, and so that perpetuates it. We look at benefits for donors. We give those that have a lot of money more benefits. So we're looking at having, no matter if you give $25 or $25,000, you all get the same benefits. We're looking at going to general admission tickets like the movie theaters do, so everyone has the opportunity to sit up front. So I'm looking at all those things that perpetuate supremacy, but we're also looking at how we budget. I think most budgeting is based on trends. If you're a predominantly white theater and you're budgeting based on trends, you're budgeting based on maintaining the status quo. This is where I think boards and smarter people than me have to be collaborative and think about new ways to be values-based and inclusive in your budgeting. So all of those things, I want to go back, even the way boards are structured, there aren't that many rules that regulate boards. Really, it's like 2. You have to meet once a year and you have to have less, you can't have less than 3 people. The rest of the rules, boards have made up since the 1950s when that whole 501c3 thing came into place. And I just believe that boards can be fantastic, altruistic volunteers that support you, but they shouldn't be your boss. Because right now I have a board of 16 people that have very little experience with theater, but they all my bosses. And so even that to me is a way to maintain some sort of supremacy. So systems and policies have to change. We can create all these programs, but they're not going to change the model. Even like this streaming issue, I'm not even sure why it's an issue. The idea of getting my play that I produce to 100,000 people versus the 5,000 that I can fit in my theater, to me, there's no question. Let's figure it out. Let's make it happen.
Thank you. And you're talking about just kind of so many differences and how like those changes can evolve, because we've been talking about like the evolution of theater. How do we evolve into a place that that is anti-racist, that is anti-oppressive, that actively changes things? And I actually want to throw something back to you, Jennifer, just because, as you said, you've been around, for a while, according to, I think, one interview since 1972, according to you, which is great. And I've seen that you've worked with like community focused and culturally specific theater, as well as larger, predominantly white institutions. So what are some of the things you think that need to happen to actually make this a moment of change, and not just like empty promises and temporary support for Black, Indigenous, and POC voices?
Well, that's a good question. It's a heavy one. But something that comes to mind to me because of something that was just on TV recently was seeing Hamilton, which I saw when it was brand new up in New York and was totally knocked out by it. And listening to, what's his name, Lin-Manuel?
Mm-hmm.
Listening to him talk about what he's doing with that, and how that play came about, and what he felt he was doing, what he feels he's doing with mounting it and putting in a multicolored cast in it was fascinating. And we don't usually think, I think that we don't usually think of Broadway plays as being plays that have lessons in them, that are lessons beyond just the superficiality of the story. And with his play, he's done that. The huge cast that he's got is very multiracial, and they never talk about it. They don't, and it's not an issue in the play per se. I mean, some people notice it and some people don't, and every once in a while there'd be a little mention of something. But it was something I saw it when it was new, and then seeing it again just recently and hearing him talk about it kind of woke up something in my mind again about how do we actually, as not just as performers, but as human beings, how do we deal with race? And have we got to a point where we can see beyond it? Or why do we always have to talk about it otherwise? Because here we are talking about it. How do and what does that do to the ways in which we present ourselves, or we present our material for other people to see and to learn from? If we are still somehow or other stuck in the quagmire of racism, not because we want to be, but because it seems to be in us, it's like in our blood, we can't get away from it, then what do we do about that? How do we bring young artists and young people in general into a world in which they can see beyond the minusculity, is that a word? It is now, of race, that it's not, it doesn't, when you see Hamilton, does it matter who is the actor who's playing Hamilton? Who is the actor who's playing, the actress who's playing the women does it matter that if you see them in, these varied races, or does it not matter? And why does it matter? And why do we care? It's not like we can change anything about the story, or that the story is going to change anything about us, but how do we get deeper than the superficiality of what color our skins are and what accents we talk with, and who we love and or who we don't love, etc. And I don't, although I'm old enough so that I've seen quite a bit of how a lot of things in race issues, it's particularly in the United States, have changed. It hasn't changed completely. We're still dealing with a lot of the same issues that our parents and our grandparents were dealing with. And we want to, I think we want to, I'm sorry if I'm going on too long, you can tell me to shut up. But how do we stop that? How do we turn so that the conversation is not always about race? It's about human beings. And and gender a lot more. We have that in our work a lot anyway, but still I feel like we're smart people, and we've all learned a lot about different things in American culture, and yet we're still in this kind of pool where the water has been drained and we can't get out. So I stop here.
And I think, sorry.
Could I ask a question as well as make a comment about that?
Absolutely.
I think that race is a beautiful thing. I think that when we look at different races, different cultures, and we look at the history and we say, oh, this culture arose from slavery, or if we look at some of our Latino population, this culture, came from a history of immigrants coming to this country during a time when they weren't wanted and kind of had to make a life for themselves. I think race becomes important because we look at Alexander Hamilton being played by this Latino person whose family were probably immigrants, or we look at George Washington being played by this Black man who probably comes from a history of slavery, and we say that's a beautiful, powerful, impactful story. If I am a young Black man seeing a Black man playing George Washington, I think that's meaningful because I know the beauty and the struggle of the race, of the history. So I think there was a question of can we look past race? Mm-hmm. And I think in a sense we don't want to look past it, but appreciate it and see that these different people from very different backgrounds can become president, can write the Constitution, or even just as simple can be in this Broadway musical where they're singing and dancing and doing flips. That can be a beautiful thing to be able to relate to, based on race, based on many other social constructs, gender, sexuality, and etc. So I would say that we probably can't look past it, and we probably shouldn't look past it because it's a very powerful and beautiful part of ourselves.
And I agree. And I think there's someone, okay. One thing that we've kind of sort of talked about a little bit is the idea of colorblind casting-ish. We've kind of talked around it a little bit. Whereas, I know with me, especially when you have that phrase colorblind, I know I have a bit of a pullback with that, because it can feel like in order for someone else to see me, they have to erase the things that make me different. You know,
well,
and
first,
so,
let me just say this. As the chair, the national chair of the Equal Employment Opportunity Community of a Committee of Actors Equity Association, we don't say colorblind casting. It's not in our language at all. You could say
And-
non-traditional, you could say anything else. No one is colorblind. That's impossible. I don't care what the role is. When I walk in the room, you obviously see who and what I am. You see my size, you see my height, you see my color. Whether you like it or not is your choice, but there's nothing colorblind about any of us when we walk in a room. So that's one of those phrases, again, that we moved it from the language because it was something that someone gave us as a means to make us feel better about being in the room. Like that would make a difference. And that's something we need to listen to and hear. No one wants to be called colorblind. And as a Black actor, I don't ever want to be thought of as having to identify with being colorblind when I walk in to read for Juliet or the nurse. Just let me be the actress that walks in the room that is the best person for the job, not the colorblind actress that you're trying to look around me to make sure. That's crazy to me. So that's one of those phrases I think we need to that should not be in our language. It no longer is in any of the language that we work under for actors' equity. I know that much. And we have to embrace that, though. We got to stop saying that about ourselves. It's okay to be who you are. That's the thing I'm saying. And we need to see people on the other side of the table that look like us so that we're comfortable when we walk in the room, and these wouldn't be issues. That's the beginning of a lot of it. You have to restructure. You want to do something, and you want to do something actionable, make the room look and feel like the people you invite in the room to do the work, to produce the shows. I don't care if it's your dramaturge or whomever it is, but the room must reflect the actors that you want that will also tell you what your audience is going to be. When you're out vetting an audience, why are you not vetting the audience that you say you want to come in and be a part of this communal thing, which we call theater? It's an experience for all people. And I agree with you, Michael. I think that's amazing what you're going for in Boston. That's amazing that everybody can see the theater and be able to afford it. But we got to start, when we go as artists in the room, we got to see ourselves. We got to know we can fall in a safe place when we walk in and somebody's hearing what we're saying and not just going, That's the beginning of change. But there's no color blind to it. I don't want you to be blind to my color. I just want you to respect my color.
And I want to add on to that with the actors in the room. Like, do you have like you mentioned, do you have like a mental checklist or criteria that you go through when you decide to work with a company that you're like, this company does blankety blankety blank, and that helps me feel safe as a person of color in this space?
I can hopefully speak to my experience here. I always set as a personal goal for myself as an actor, along the lines of what Ife was just saying. I try to walk into a room and I want to get a role that was not written specifically for me walking in the room. I want to be better than every actor going for a role that I know that I can play. I always bring up the story of Mark Crixton at First Stage, who gave me the chance to play Dennis in Mauritius, which is one of the best roles I've ever played in my life. Just juicy in every way. That role was played by Bobby Cannavale, I think, Broadway, Italian guy, completely written for a different type. And Mark was like, he cast me and Roger Paiano in those two opposite roles. And he said, yeah, like you two were the best for this role. He didn't care about, that I was a Black guy playing it, whatever. He was like, you two are the best people for these roles. I always try to do that. On the flip side, regarding producers and what work they choose to produce, I've also only been called in for certain theaters when they are doing a show that is heavily, a quote unquote Black show. There are several theaters in DC that I've only been called in whenever there's a role for a young Black man. There are times when I've been called in for a season and I say, actually, I would like to, be seen for this show. And it's like completely off the the grid. Apparently, it's like, oh, we weren't considering you for that. We see that you fit here. So it goes both ways. Producers also need to be producing shows and keeping an open mind as to the different actors that may be qualified and talented enough to play certain roles. But on the flip side of that, also actors, we have to also know what we want and what we are presenting at an open call. I went to an open call many years ago at Roundhouse, and I'll never forget Denisha, and it was great feedback. Denisha said to me, and I hope she remembers this. She said, "Oh, I did a monologue." She said, "Oh, thank you for doing that, because usually when a young Black male or young Black woman walk in, I'm expecting, or I know what they're most likely going to do." And I said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "Well, usually it's going to be a monologue revolved around race." And at the time, I thought, "Oh, well, I have a few of those in my library, but that's not all I can do." It took me a while to realize what she meant. I was at the Equity open call years later, and sure enough, out of 20 Black actors that walked in, I would say 15 of the 20 began with a monologue that was revolved around race and a song that was revolved around race. And that was all they had prepared. So there wasn't anything else that they had to show, but they wanted to be cast as the lead in a classical piece or in something that wasn't a Black show. So I think it also goes both ways, where you have to also present your full arsenal of what it is that you want as talent when it comes to what you're seeking to be cast in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that to add on to that, actor training for young people of color is a lot of the time not in the direction it should be. Because I will say, as a young Black actor in grad school, I was told that I need to learn Aaron the Moor for my Shakespeare monologue. I need to find an August Wilson piece. I need to do this Susan Laurie Parks monologue. And those are the monologues I need to go into my open calls with, because those are the roles I'm going to get cast in. And I think that I love this Confucius saying that's like, if you want to plan for a year, plant rice. If you want to plan for 10 years, plant trees. If you want to plan for 100 years, educate children. And I think that when it goes, all the way down to how we're educating people, how we're training people, our young people and our audiences, we could stand to do away with some of these old tropes of, hey, Black actor, here are some August Wilson monologues, learn them. Like, I don't even do, I have my Black monologues and I don't even do them anymore, because when I walk into a room, the casting director can see that I'm a Black male. So I probably can play an August Wilson role. I want to show you something that maybe you can't visualize me as, to kind of piggyback on what Edward said. So, I think on the checklist, there is a bit of let me do something, let me show sides of myself that are more rounded than just simply what you see when I walk into the room.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Alexi, that's going to go to you, Kelly.
Real quick. So what's a Black show? Like, I mean, I think, white actors are not going in saying, let me find something other than me to show the dimension of me. I think that Lydia Diamond is not Lynn Nottage, is not Susan Larry Parks. I think I can find the dimension of me in anything Black or not, depending, because they are different people and they write differently. And August Wilson is not Coleman Domingo. We are varied. And because you only see us in an August Wilson, you think they're doing something Black, when Black is beautiful and Black is multifaceted, and I can do something in that vein and still be doing something different, showing you something different. So the first thing we have to do is open, our own minds to how beautiful Black really is and all the colors that are in Black. Now, that's not to say that if you want to do some of those other things, you can absolutely do some of those things. You can do all things, but don't think that you have to divorce yourself to do them. That's awesome.
Great.
Amen.
This is where I think organizations can think about policy. Because I think what you guys are asking is people to open their hearts and minds to the possibility of casting people of color in any role. But until you are a fiercely anti-racist company, that's going to be hard because you have to fight through people's biases.
Yes.
And everyone has biases. So again, thinking about policy, I have a rule that at least 50% of our artists for the season have to be BIPOC. They have to be. And so I've taken the choice away from my directors, and I've taken the choice away from people's biases by having policies. And usually every single time I've done that, it's worked out beautifully well because we found great artists of color to showcase on the stage. And sometimes the directors really struggle because they have their favorite people that they like to work with all the time, but then they get a rich, rewarding experience because now they're in a room with other people. So again, I think policy and culture, fight policy right now because we can do that, and then you may have an influence on culture.
Yeah.
Well, one thing, Nicole Brewer, who is one of the leading experts on anti-racist theater, she says there's 3 principles when it comes to anti-racist theater: harm reduction, harm prevention, and relationship repair. And so, in thinking that more deeply, I think you just kind of addressed that, because it's like one of the questions is what philosophies and processes need to be in place to learn and process from their mistakes that will inevitably happen. And I think that's that harm reduction aspect of it. But then there's also those areas of growth. How do you prevent it? And that kind of policy seems to be something that that's used in prevention. So in the broader scheme of things, I just want to kind of ask everybody, what do you think can be done to reduce harm? Because there is definitely a wall. I feel like we mentioned with the price of tickets, there's a wall between diverse audiences and access. There can be a wall between actors and performers and playwrights of various marginalized identities and being able to access the theater. So what can be done to bridge that or to work in a way that destroys the norms that prevent that from happening?
I don't know, but I can just want to have one tiny response to that, is that you can't. And then that you can't break all of those things down because people will fight it. People who have certain things ingrained in their personalities or the ways they're used to operating in the world. It's very difficult for them to step outside of those tropes that they're in to get to something else. And in a way, I think that's detrimental to actors in particular. And in a way, I think, well, it's a learning thing that's happening here. This is a terrific learning possibility, option, that like when you study theater in school, if you do that or whatever else you study there, at some point there's going to be somebody who tries to break down a barrier that they see their students having, whether it's just an individual or several people, because hopefully the teacher, the professor sees that there's something else there that the individual could access if they could get through that wall or get past that wall or go down the stairs or go up the stairs. And there, I don't know that there is an actual means of doing that that's the same all of the time. I think it has to do with who is the individual who is having difficulty getting past the iron wall, and who is the person who is teaching. And I've taught some as well, but I've seen some teachers sometimes that I just thought, oh my God, they need to be thrown out of the room. They become destructive in their attempt to help their students bypass certain, what they might see as places that they can't get by. And so they try to push really hard to make those things happen. And a lot of times sometimes pushing is a good thing, and it helps people get past the things that are difficult for them. But other times that's not what they need. And that there's something there in the teaching of acting and the practice of acting that doesn't always acknowledge that it's not so easy. It's not like you could just turn the page and be different. You know, there are a number of facts that have to be taken into consideration in terms of who is this actor and what have they experienced before, what do they know now, what do they want, what do they get, and then how do we help people break those walls down in order to get to the next step. That, I think what I'm hearing anyway is that we're all kind of agreeing that there are these other steps, for actors to get to, so that they can reach the deeper parts of their facilities and their talent. But how do you do that is not like just something you can check off on a chalkboard. It's a very complex, emotional, psychological process that each actor has to go through.
And Kelly, what do you tell your students when you talk about safety and making sure that they're okay in the space?
For the most part, I certainly say that I want this to be a safe space, but safe space does not mean non-confrontational. And that we're all pushing ourselves to get to the best work. I also would say I just want to go into some of the things that artists, I feel, or that different organizations have done to make it a safe space. So I was listening to a talk that was similar to this one, and they had talked about having maybe an anti-racist person in the room when you're dealing with a show that has to do with race, or that has different races in the show, that you have someone there who's able to I guess facilitate, not necessarily facilitate the rehearsal, but who's there to basically say, when these things pop up, that will pop up, right? The conversations you're having, that someone can call something out and put an end to it, so that it's not on the person of color to have to call out the problematic behavior, right? And then become something else. And then, you have to think about, is it okay for me to say this? Do I want to be hired again? Da, da, da. Have some.
Whoops.
Kelly, we lost like a minute of you.
And another thing that which is Dominique. So can you hear me now?
Yes, but we lost like 30 seconds, though your face is frozen now.
Can you hear me? It's okay. So Dominique Morisseau, with one of her shows, she had an encounter in the theater with another patron that had to do with etiquette, or how we're supposed to behave. And I think that if we want diverse people to come to the theater, then we can't all expect them to follow particular rules. So she, as the playwright, now has an insert when her plays are happening that basically says, come as you are. If this is the amen corner, if you have some and ahas, you are more than welcome here, right? And so that we don't have to sit next to people who've been going to theater for hundreds and hundreds of years and have what they think the etiquette is. She's saying, it's my play and it's my rules, and you are welcome here. And so that's something that I think that organizations and particular artists have done to ensure that there's a certain kind of welcoming or inclusivity, to the.
I'm going to add to that, because Lin-Manuel Miranda also has a story like that, about him going to the theater and like laughing and enjoying himself, and someone in the theater audience just kind of staring at him and like trying to, just being condescending, which I think is it kind of pulls people away from the idea of like, oh, theater's this lovely, welcoming place and blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, when the people who you put, kind of almost at the top of the echelon are still, when they're not in their obvious space, being reprimanded by, a typically white audience, then, what do you do as a theater to make sure it is as welcoming space as you think it is?
Well, that again, I say that goes with what we see when we walk in the door. These organizations have to change the people I meet when I come to your theater. If I'm not welcomed from the time I walk in, if I don't see house management, concessions, ushers, I'm just going down the litany of people, staff, crew people, dressers. I'm talking about everybody. If the world does not look like the world outside, how can it be that welcoming for people that are different? It has to at least invite me into its world. So I want to understand, and I can learn. We all can learn. But so many times we go in with this preconceived notion of what it should be instead of enjoying the experience of what theater is. We all leave and we have a different opinion. So we all react differently. But we don't really set this model up to do that for especially African Americans that want to go to the, we don't set it because they go, oh, you go to the theater? It should, I don't, when people say that to me, I'm like, yes, and you can go too. Let's go and have fun. And then they go and they see a show. They say, my God, I never thought could be that good. Well, that's the welcoming of that. You know what I'm saying? The community, if the community welcomes people into their theater and it looks like them, like, again, I go back to rehearsal hall rooms, like the intimacy coaches. Having an intimacy coach and now having someone that's there for inclusion and diversion, that coach having to be in the room, and we hope we get that through, that's going to make the difference so that an actor does not, I agree with you, Kelly, have the responsibility, or even as a writer sitting at the table, have to explain your piece to somebody. Go talk to her. She'll help you out. I'm here working with artists because that's the problem sometimes. We take so much time up to have to explain who we are, what we're doing, why we said it, when it happened, and it's like, school is out. I graduated. We have to be more informed. We have to listen and be more informed. When you invite me to your house, don't make me feel like you forgot I was coming. I said it to the theaters all the time. When I arrive at a theater and people are not ready for me, that's where I get that reputation from. Don't treat me like you didn't know I was coming. I don't want to find out where to get my hair done. You asked me to come, you find where I get my hair done. I don't want you to tell me where I can't go to the grocery store. You should have had that list together before you invited me to your house. Those are simple things that a lot of white actors never, and artists, period, white artists don't deal with, whether they be a writer, a director, never have to deal with when they leave their home. And that's a part of what we deal with when you were asking earlier, when we step into the room. I just want to be welcomed like I would welcome you to my house. I know you're coming. I'm ready for you. That's the new change we've got to make. That's where it becomes person on person. If you make me feel welcome, I'm willing to sit down and talk to you. But I'm not going to talk to you and be pleasant if you don't welcome me in like you want me to be there.
Amen. I don't know if there's anything left to say.
Come in. I'll be right back.
Action, 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 action.
Action, action, action. Expect me. Expect me.
We, as a gay person, I know a space is safe, somewhat safe, because there's a rainbow flag somewhere, right? We don't have those markers for people of color. We find out if a place is safe by your action.
Yes.
And we call our girlfriends, and we call our best friends, and we let them know that the place is safe. You can go and enjoy yourself. So we have action, action, action.
That is something that I want you to hear what Michael just said. It's very true. For anybody that's listening to the conversation, we as an African-American community of artists and people of color have to check back in once we arrive at a white facility in a white city that's not prepared for us sometimes, to make sure we're safe with the people in our community. Hear that.
And we tell friends that might buy your tickets.
And that's the general community. So that's the friends who may have access to, if you want, a bunch of young, Black children come to your show, then the first person going to be there is going to check, is this a safe place for my kids to come? You know, is this a place that my aunt will feel welcome? Am I going to tell my church that they should come, or am I not? I can totally keep that to myself.
Because we can bring people now. We can put butts in seats.
We can. It's true.
If you welcome us.
You know, and that's that education. It's kind of like what fundamentally needs to change in the structure, in the way things are formatted, in the way things are presented, that need to actually make it a place that is welcoming.
When people go into this work, and dismantling racism is like major surgery.
Yeah.
Major surgery. And so many people go into this work without having any education, and they wind up just re-injuring people. You have to learn, you have to understand bias and microaggression and the systems of racism. You just have to do your homework to find out if you want people of color, if you feel like this is something you value, then you have to do the work. You can't just go. I mean, one of the mistakes that I've been doing a lot of consulting with theaters because they wanted me to come in and help them do EDI work. And they would say, one of the action steps was, we'll cast more people of color. And then you look at the budget and there's no resources put behind casting people of color. And I say, how is that going to happen? If you're a white institution, people of color are not going to come audition for you just because you say, I'm going to put more people of color. How are you marketing it? Are you going to see shows with people of color in it? Are you taking those people of color out to dinner or coffee or lunch to tell them what you're trying to do to persuade them? You have to put work behind it. So action, but start with education. Educate yourself about it and then action. And check in with people about your action first. Don't ask them to create it for you, right? But check in to make sure that what you're doing is correct.
Yeah, I think I agree. I just add a little thing that you have to be at a point in your life. It doesn't necessarily mean a particular age in your life or anything, but at a stage in your life when you are centered enough about who you are to be able to speak frankly, honestly, openly with people that you don't know, without stumbling all over yourself, or being afraid that you're saying things that not in the way that you wish that you'd said, and later you go home and you go, oh shit, why did I say that? You know what I mean? That there's a kind of self-centeredness that all of us need to have for ourselves and to cultivate for ourselves. And doesn't mean that suddenly you feel like you're better than everybody and you're talking different, but just that you have enough of a centered place in yourself so that when somebody asks you a question, for example, you can answer and feel confident that what you're saying is something that you truly believe, or that you were honest about. You're not going to give them any bullshit about it. You're going to say what you believe, and that's a difficult thing for a lot of us to do, regardless of age or race or whatever. That to be able to be that kind of honest with other people as well as honesty with yourself it's a challenge. That's all. And it never really stops, because your life goes on and you take turns and, go in different directions. You meet people that you hadn't met before. And that sometimes makes you, they ask you a question or something comes up, and you do need to know how to be able to speak to them in a way that is appropriate for this person that you're talking to that you never talked to before. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent there, but there is something about, for actors in particular, but I think it's also for directors and for playwrights as well, that about how do you speak who you really are when you're speaking through your character, for example, or how do you be that character and fill that character the way that you want to without making yourself feel like you're doing the wrong, that you're not doing things the way you wish they were done, or later you go, oh shit, I should have done this, I should have said it this way. And of course we all go through things like moments like that later, but nonetheless there's a kind of self learning that I think actors and in particular have to be constantly doing, being aware of, like, who am I now? Because I'm talking to this director or this whoever, the playwright or whatever, whoever it is I'm talking, who am I in this? Am I, you know, am I the me that talks to my parents this way, a certain way, or you know, do I have questions that I need to ask this person that I'm a little nervous about asking? You know, that it's I'm sorry, I don't want to go on and on, but I will. Anyway, that there is something really essential about the inner life of being an actor, of being a performer, whether it's actor, singer, dancer, whatever, that has to be whole, W-H-O-L-E, in you, you know, so that you don't stumble around and say words that you wish later you hadn't said it that way or something, but that you feel that, you know, that you have a place inside of you somewhere that you know you can speak your truth with whoever it is you're talking to. And if you don't have that sense of that, then you need to find a way to work on it, so that, because without it, it leaves you kind of shaky. You know, sometimes I'm not, oh, did I say that? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way.
Well, I never.
Well, Jennifer, I just wanted to add
exactly what I say when I say it, and I know who I'm saying it to. And I've been in this business 40 years. And I say the best way to get forward is to be forward. I'm very forward. I'm very strong. I think that's the problem with African-American artists. We always are trying to figure out how to navigate their world, navigate my world. You invite me in, I want you to navigate my world. I want you to hear me. I want you to listen to me. And then I want you to put action forward. That's how I move forward. And I think that's what artists need to do, is be stronger as Black artists and say what you want to say. What can they say to me? But I don't agree with you. Fine, let's move forward.
Well, one thing there's a couple of things I want to kind of roll a little bit. One, we've been had a lot of focus on the actors and the playwrights and the directors, you know, which is super important. But I think also when it comes to theater is also a workplace. You know, so you're also talking about, you know, your administrators, people in the education department, people in development, finance, programming. So I want to ask with the artistic directors and managers, what do you think the roles are of those departments in creating in anti-racist theater as a company and as a workplace?
I'm sorry, could you ask the question again? Excuse me. Just
And so asking, you know, those who are on this call who are directors and managers specifically, what they feel the role of, you know, finance, program and development is in creating an anti-racist theater and workplace.
Letitia, you know, one of the things, hey, it's Alex here. One of the things, and I think Michael couldn't have said it better, is that, you know, we as a field, when we've talked about this issue over the last 20 years, we've talked about it almost exclusively in terms of programming, right? What's on our stage, who's on our stage, because of course we're all obsessed with the art. But that is a superficial, that's of course necessary, but it is a Band-Aid on a larger problem, right? Which is, how do our institutions work? What is the hierarchy of our institutions? As Ife says, who is in that room, but not just the rehearsal room. And I think one of the places that we've just begun really examining is who's controlling the money, who's controlling the business side of it, who's making those decisions. Because we all, no matter what we say, we show our values in our budgets. Michael couldn't be more right when he says that we create our budgets based on history. Right. One of the pledges that we've made is to start with a blank page with our budget for the first time in probably 13 years. Right. Because what you do when you look at a budget is you say, well, how much did we pay last year? What does this cost? And then we'll adjust it a little bit based on that. Right. And even what feels like a big step is actually an incredibly small step, because you're using a norm that is probably based in supremacy and racism, and you're tweaking it as opposed to tearing it apart. We still have those conversations almost exclusively in white rooms. we're starting to see rehearsal rooms. We're starting to see places where the artists gather be more diverse. There's a long way to go, but Ife's starting to see more people who look like her in those rooms. But when you walk in boardrooms, when you walk in budget rooms, when you walk in those rooms, they still remain overwhelmingly white. And part of that is because you can hide it better, right? You're not putting it literally on stage, right? So only a few people know what it looks like there. And part of it is because we haven't demanded it of ourselves. So I think that actually, I think is, as you say, the workplace, the institution gets shaken up from the inside, and the programming will follow there. No, that's not to say we shouldn't be concerned about programming, of course, but the programming will come from having an institution that is actively built to be anti-racist. But it won't happen necessarily the other way. Putting those shows on stage will not change what the institution is. And I think we're finally engaging in those conversations. And I speak of myself too. I think we, First Stage, are finally engaging in those conversations in meaningful ways. But I think the field is as well.
Laura, did I see your hand go up?
Kind of, yes. Just a little sort of footnote to that. At the Stage Guild, we just did a board development project with a nonprofit organization called Compass that gave us a whole lot of tools to develop we're a very small company, and we have a very small board, and we've made a really strong commitment to bring 3 new board members on in the next year and to diversify our board, because we've had board members of color in the past. We had a couple of really wonderful board members who left the city for other jobs in other places that were people of color. And so our board right now is all white, and we want to diversify it. But so much, I think, comes down to money, finding the money and having in a weird way, the pandemic has given us the luxury of time to focus on this board development project with the kind of energy that I think it deserves and needs. Because we're a very small organization. A lot of our board members are also members of the artistic company. And so when we're producing a season of 4 plays, we're running as fast as we can to get the shows up and produce them and do all the work of production, as well as most of the people in our company have other jobs. They teach, or I narrate audiobooks, and everybody's got 12 million different things that they have to do. And during this period, which Lord knows how much longer it's going to go on, that we're not able to get back to production. But as the board president, I've made it my job to try to focus our energy to accomplish some of these goals that we've harbored for a long time and never effectively acted upon in a meaningful way, to diversify our board. We've done a lot of non-traditional casting over the years and had people of different ethnicities and nationalities working with our company, but we have to do more. And I think part of what we can do between now and the end of the year, because it looks like we're not going to be producing until the end of the year, is do a lot of that work that, particularly in light of tonight's conversation, I'm hearing more and more and reading things online that are educating me that we need to do more, and we can use this time to position ourselves better for the future, I hope.
I'm glad you mentioned something else about the future, because it's like not just changing right now, but changing a system that goes on further than this immediate moment or the next 2 years or 5 years, but that it is something that becomes part of the fabric. Ari?
Right, thank you. First, I want to answer your very first question. What brings me joy is it's my 35th wedding anniversary tonight. So after we're done here, I got soft shell crabs to cook. So, what the joy is in this moment of intersections, of overlapping public and private, of personal and public, of the work and then the love too. And that, as we've been confined to home, there's been a lot of family time, and then there is a lot of intense public time and thinking about how we become a more evolved and a more intentional and a more anti-racist community, organization and whatnot. So we're in a very unique time here, and we don't want to squander it, and we don't want to the intentionality that I want to address, the question that you posed about how do we ensure that staff reflects what Aoife's saying, the welcoming that we all aspire to invite diverse cohort of artists and audience into our mix. Mosaic was started 5 years ago, and the very first hires we did were a board. We have a 45% board of color. We have a 48% staff of color. That is all intention. It's, it's 15 people. There's a lot, 15 people on a staff, 30 people on a board. And those are a lot of relationships that you want to have intentionality about. You're here for a reason. You're here for your ambassadorial, credibility. You're here because you got some money. You're here because you got access to institutions. You're here for a reason, and you're part of a community. Jennifer Nelson was a founding director with us, and her role was huge in lending her artistry to shows. So I think there is talk and then there's walk, and you need to make sure that your actions help substantiate your mission. We, like so many other theaters, and I really applaud Transformation Theater for coming into the world, and your title is incredibly aspirational, and it's everything that we all aspire to, the transformational experience. Not just the anti this and and the keeping people from this and the reducing this. What are we building together? What is I'm not down with the whole refraining from trauma. Theater for me is the realm of conflict, but it is about catharsis and it is about transformation. So as I've been producing work about the Holocaust when I was a Jewish theater producer for 18 years, I did 12 plays about the Holocaust. Each one was different. Each one had value. Each one aspired to the transformational. Each one ripped off the Band-Aid of denial where you didn't want to admit what lived in yourself. All those were vital. And I see that vitality in the play selection we do, whether it's a comedy, whether it's a jukebox musical, whether it's a trauma drama, all of it has a place. It's all at the intersections. And what you want is your staff to buy into it. You want a diverse staff saying, we buy into the whole package.
Wow.
Thank you.
Happy anniversary. There we go.
Yes, happy anniversary, Ari, and thank you for your support to our company. I appreciate that a lot. I'm actually going to steal something that I heard somebody say recently, Michael. That that resonated with me because I've heard you say it a couple of times now, but it's resonated quite clearly to me, is that this process needs to be viewed as a process of love, not as a process of hate or overcoming hate necessarily, although that is definitely part of the problem that we have in our society, but that we want to approach this from a process of love. And I think as long as we always start with that basis, we're able to then find inclusion a lot easier. And regardless whether we're talking about ethnicity, gender, sexuality, all of those things that make us different are what bring us together to create some really fantastic art. And I think, and I agree with what has been said, a lot of people have been saying, and we're kind of seem to be reiterating each other a lot. And that's I think it's the blend of the celebration of our diversity, but also recognizing the pain that's come along to be able to get to where we are now and to look forward to see where we still need to go.
Yeah, equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, anti-oppression, anti-white supremacy, these are all acts of love. You're showing love to people that have not been loved before. We're not trying to start a race war. We're trying to end a race war. And so if your heart and your mind has changed and you see the value in this, then put your weight behind it, put your money behind it, put your real loving thoughts behind how you can break this down, because it's possible. The other thing I would just want to say is that I know that the institutional struggle to dismantle racism is the hardest part. I mean, Laura was talking about boards, and Alice was talking about the financial structures. But again, as we're looking at dismantling it, think about the resources you have. I mean, if you have an all-white board, then invite artists, people of color who are artists in the room into the budgeting process. You know, there's so many things you can do to dismantle what is broken. And I'm the kind of person that I don't like to put lipstick on a pig. I like to change the whole animal. You know, instead of trying to tweak it and all this stuff, if it doesn't work, throw it out. Let's build something brand new. And the other thing I will say is that I recognize that I have some intelligence, but I'm mostly an artist. And so I know where my limitations are. And I know that I don't know how to build a new financial model that is completely inclusive and values-based. So I'm looking forward to finding like economists and MBAs and entrepreneurs and social scientists and futurists to help me figure this out, because I think it's worth the time and energy, and the outcome hopefully is more love.
Yay. Well, only one more thing to say, I hope. I'm 71, and I've kind of stopped trying to think that I could fix things, but just trying to learn how to listen and think things through in ways that I didn't when I was younger, when I was, I thought I knew how to do this and I could do it fast. Oh, I can do that. Don't worry about it. And I am grateful to life that I could get to this point where I can have a different kind of perspective on what theater is. Do I even want to do it anymore? And the answer basically is no. And to be honest about it with myself about it, it's a turning point in my life. So that's all. I just want to say that out loud to other people. So you don't have to bring me any presents though.
Well, we love everything that you brought to this conversation and to the theater community as a whole. So even if you're like, no more, we love when you've been here. So thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you everyone who's been a part of this panel. I think, leading with love is one of the things that we should take with us as we think about pushing forward to our next step. And I know that this thing that I'm thinking of, where they talk about different love languages, different ways to express it. So I think our theaters need to learn the love languages of the communities that they're trying to interact with, and be intentional about that. So thank you, our actors, our writers, our directors, our artistic directors. You've all been amazing. Thank you, Carl and Transformation Theater, for putting this together. And let's go forth and do some more awesome things.
I want to have lunch with Ife Butler. That's okay.
I want to exist with Ife Butler. Like,
you're on mute, Ife. You're on mute.
I said I'll be in DC in August. We'll have lunch.
Okay, I'll be here.
I'm coming for the March on Washington. You know I ain't gonna miss that.
Hey,
there you go.
Hey.
All right then.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
This is great.
Thank you all.
And thank you, Carl, for putting it together.
Wow, look at all those other people who've been talking and we didn't even hear them. All righty.